Okay, so it's been a while and I've been planning to do this video for some time, and I'm looking at the impact the pandemic has had on sport. Now, each sport has been impacted in different ways, and I'm going to use some examples to discuss how I think the COVID pandemic ultimately impacted certain sports. So in association football, we had the men's Euros and the women's Euros both delayed by a year. The women's Euros took place last year. The men's Euros took place 2 years ago. So they were delayed by a year each. The Rugby League World Cup was delayed by a year. The subsequent tournament, which is meant to take place in 2025, we don't know if it's actually going to go ahead. France has pulled out of hosting because of the rising costs associated since the pandemic. Inflation's gone up, costs have gone up. And revenues are down. Revenues are still recovering. So the Rugby League World Cup, we don't know if the 2025 tournament is going to be delayed by a year and who is going to host it. So that may be cancelled altogether. We've had cancelled seasons, so like the CFL and Major League Rugby over in Canada and the US. The CFL in 2020, it's a gate-driven league. Not a lot of TV revenue, heavily reliant on fans and attendance, didn't play in 2020. Major League Rugby, again, a gate-driven league. A more minority league over in the US and Canada, again a weaker TV deal. It was going to cost them more money to play with no fans in attendance than just shut down the league altogether. The lost revenues, that impacts everyone. Every major sport lost money. Now some sports like pro cycling, for example, can go ahead. So the Tour de France did go ahead. It was delayed slightly, but it went ahead with a full stage programme. But it did lose money because they had to reschedule it, and that leads to discussions with broadcasters. We've seen a lockout of a major league, and that's Major League Baseball. There were, in 2020, the return to play talks were very, very fraught. That carried on into the CBA negotiations, which weren't negotiations because the Major League Baseball Players Association and the league just didn't bother to negotiate. They allowed it to lapse, and the owners locked them out. That caused some image damage to Major League Baseball. Plus, they were meant to take games over to the UK in 2020. They didn't return in 2021 or 2022, so they've delayed their return to their overseas global series to London to this year. That is quite interesting. Debts in association football and rugby union. Rugby union, we've seen 3 English teams go out of business. 2 of them, I think, is wholly down to the COVID pandemic. That's London Irish and Worcester Warriors. Wasps, their debts were exacerbated by the pandemic. They were already struggling financially pre-2020. The COVID pandemic accelerated their collapse. So Rugby Union, the Welsh Rugby Union as well, they've got a lot of problems. They're short of cash. Again, that predates the pandemic, but it's been made worse due to the pandemic. Football, obviously the rise of the European Super League in response to some major clubs having ridiculous amounts of debt, which is basically a third world country's deficit in their back pocket. That's Real Madrid, that's Barcelona, that's Juventus, and the other clubs that signed up to it. Real Madrid and Barcelona have billions and billions of euros worth of debts. The COVID pandemic did expose those debts, expose their bad financial practices and their poor governance. They came up with the European Super League to fix their problems. That quickly fell apart, and that was a PR damage. They have also had issues signing players, honouring contracts, and players are leaving on free transfers because they can't renew their contracts. That links in back to the lost revenues. Also in football, we've seen clubs go out of business on a lower level. So there's that. Obviously, we've seen structural changes to sporting leagues. We've seen a lot of logistical nightmares. Look at the AFL and NRL in Australia having to play in bubbles. The NHL having to play in a bubble and have a very disrupted 2021 season. So rescheduling of seasons, reduced seasons, which has led to flat salary caps, where the salary caps, which were projected to explode, haven't. So the NHL's pretty much been in a flat cap era for a couple of years. The rise of more sponsorships in the major leagues over in North America as well. We're now seeing the major sponsors on jerseys, helmets and equipment in the NBA, NHL, NFL and Major League Baseball. Fans aren't overly happy with that. We're seeing sponsors running out of cash. So teams are looking for new sponsors. Teams are looking for new ways to earn revenue. So the gambling industry has become quite important. And we can debate the pros and cons of gambling sponsorship in sport. So yeah, it's been the impacts are wide-ranging. We've just seen the latest Champions League final of all time, apart from COVID, in a regular season, the latest FA Cup final of all time, apart from the COVID disrupted 2019-2020 season. So we've seen some very, very late finishes of domestic leagues and cup competitions across Europe. The Stanley Cup playoffs, we're into the middle of June now. Vegas could win it in 5, but if it goes to Game 7, we're talking the latest Stanley Cup being awarded ever in a regular season, which is not disrupted by COVID. So it has had a much wide-ranging impact than people realise, and obviously hosting tournament costs. France has got the Rugby Union World Cup this year, it's got the Olympics coming up, it's pulled out of hosting the Rugby League World Cup. So running costs as well have been a concern. This is just for regular teams in their regular seasons or major tournaments and Olympics. Running costs have become a concern. So we're now seeing, especially with the IIHF ice hockey, more co-hosting of World Championships rather than a single host to spread the cost more evenly. So costs have gone up. So yeah, the impact has actually been far more wide-ranging than I think people realise. It's not business as normal. Look at the LIV Golf breakaway from the PGA and then the remerger, for example. Revenue is important, and finding new revenue streams and new investment is important. Probably more so than before 2020. We've seen gate receipts down in some locations. Like attendances are actually lower than what they were before because fans have less money to spend because people have lost their jobs. So it's very, very interesting to see the impacts. It's not business as normal as what it was before. We're seeing a great upheaval across many, many sports. What sports do you think have been most effective? I'm just using some examples of the sports that I follow. We have seen major disruptions. We have seen, bubble playoffs, playing with no fans in attendance, lost revenues, debates over salaries, exploding debts, which have to be paid off at some point. We are seeing a change in financial rules in football as part of a consequence, which I think would have happened anyway, but have been accelerated by what has happened with the European Super League. We've seen restructuring of tournaments. So it's not business as normal. Things have changed. It will take a while for things to level out again and get back to where they were pre-2020, but salary caps and salaries and operating costs are going to take a while of fluctuation before they level out again. So anyway, place your thoughts in the comment section below. What was your favourite sport impacted by the pandemic? Is one of your teams that you follow really struggling financially? We know some teams have had to drop down a level and go to part-time status as well. Some teams can't afford to keep their best stars. They've had to let them go in order to keep their salaries down. So place your thoughts in the comment section below. What sports that you follow that have been impacted, how they've been impacted, how structures of leagues have changed. And I'll be interested to see what you guys have to say. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comment section below. I will have some more content for you very, very soon.